Well, the thing about what you've done here now, Derek, is you've transformed the image of the club, and it must be a lot easier, therefore, to recruit players because, whereas at one time, players in Australia might have said, where the hell's Leigh? I've never heard of him. It's much more likely now that they'll know what you've achieved, and they'll be very keen to come here and follow in the footsteps of, players like, Lachlan or Matt Moylan or whoever it is who's come over here.
Yeah, well, I mean, you see that, don't you? The Challenge Cup puts you on that pedestal.
Yeah.
Finishing in the playoffs puts you on that pedestal. The facilities out.
Yeah.
Adrian Lamb, assistant, international Australian coach.
Yeah.
World Cup winning. He's known, so that's a big asset, as well as what he does for our club. The fact that he's in that role and the fact that all the Australian and NRL players know him and respect him makes it easy. We're not going to recruit Matt Moylan with an unknown coach.
No.
Him being over there in the World Cup, talking to Matt, helps make that happen. So,
and of course, Adrian's an ex-Queensland captain, isn't he?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
We had a bit of trivia a couple of episodes ago. We were talking about him and Freddie Fittler. They were the last two to captain State of Origin teams from the same club, because this year they had...
That was in 2004, wasn't it?
Was it
2000?
Yeah.
2000, right.
Which was a bit of trivia. But I think early in the year, Martyn and I, we were really hopeful with all the rumours that you guys were in talks with potentially Tristan Saylor. Wanted to ask you, was that ever close to being finalised, that deal? Or
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
I just thought the way he would have fit into your spine at the start of the season would have been electric to see him play in the Super League.
I mean, I don't mind saying I was a bit be careful what I say, but I went down. I went to a lot of expense because there was obviously you need your GBE certification, the RFL, everything's got to be done, and to do that we needed to engage in some legal stuff because there was the widely reported case for Tristan over in the NRL, which he was completely cleared
exonerated.
He was exonerated. So therefore, I was arguing that that stigmatised him in terms of what he would have achieved, and that he shouldn't be in any way stigmatised by something he was wrongly charged and accused of, and stood out of the game as a result of which was supported through a legal argument and then accepted. So I'd gone through all of that, and of course things have to move in a certain way, and you're not going to get a release from a club until you've got somewhere to go. But what I hadn't realised is that there hadn't been any kind of blessing that if it was forward he could. So by the time we'd gone through all that and everything was right, the player was fine, the RFL was fine, the GBE was done, the club he was at was like, nope. A bit like we were with Tom Amone. And I fully understood and respected that. He's their player, and they're like, absolutely no way is he going anywhere.
Yeah.
Is that one dead in the water? 100% not. So we're still, his contract's up at the end of this year there. We're still very much in talks with him. We still very much hope to see him over there. We moved on to David Armstrong in terms of the, adding this year on the shorter term. He's recently got in and been doing well and I think extending there. So
yes, at Newcastle,
But yeah, we can be linked with them, and then of course you've seen you've seen Aaron Penny just arrive recently as well and get stuck in. So that just shows our commitment this year to whilst we've known that spot isn't available for that sort of additional speed into the side, we've brought some additional power and leg speed in the middle for Adrian.
Can we just move on to talk about the state of the game as it currently stands, Derek? Because obviously we've got this new regime in place, the IMG grading system, which I think is pretty controversial, and in fact I've got to say I don't like it. I find the whole idea that things off the field determine who should be in the elite division and so on, and this insistence on only going by grading scores, even if there's only 0.1 percentage point between you and the next best or next worst club, that will determine whether you're in Super League or not next year, regardless of which club you are. I just find that absolutely ridiculous. But I just wonder what your thoughts are on that, because maybe I'm just missing something. Who knows?
Mine echo yours now. You know, in the infancy, when it was suggested over at the Etihad, I supported it with reservations, so I voted in favour, but with some reservations that I outlined in the minutes, because I didn't feel it was advantageous. I think the sport at the time needed to fully come behind something. I was a little bit misinformed, or uninformed, shall I say, rather than misinformed, because I wasn't misinformed. I just wasn't informed, and I don't think anyone was. The relationship was actually a contractual, financial one.
Exactly, and of course, as a club owner, you won't have seen the contract between the Rugby Football League and IMG, will you? I don't suppose.
No. But having
so
said
you're voting
that,
on something you've not really seen.
Yeah, I'm voting on something that I believe at the time is about. You know, the sport was in a. Listen, it looked.
It needed something doing.
It looked like this. We needed to do something. We've got no money to do anything. We certainly can't go and recruit the wealth of experience and talent that is part of IMG and Endeavour and all the various facets to their business. So, as I understood it, these people saw our sport as an opportunity that, you know, could massively grow and increase, and they wanted to do that for zero, on the basis that they would profit within a percentage share from the growth. So, and I would look at something like that and think, right, I'm going to invest in that business. It might not be financially, it might be with all my resources to make it better, on the basis that once I do, because I know I will, I'll get my money. So that's kind of putting your money or your time, resources where your mouth is, believing in what you're getting involved in.
Exactly.
There's a difference in that and signing basically a £5 million deal with that company that sees them do whatever over 10 years. So we're a client of theirs. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
And I've openly said it before, so I don't mind saying it again here. So then when that then changes what someone's relationship and what it is, and when I look each month at, you know, an email that details what's going on, I'm not really interested in that. I'm about, you know, our meeting in here before with you was, I know what you've took out of my business in terms of what I'm paying you each month in the time you've been here. What have you put into the till in this business? Because ultimately that's what we're all measured by, results and what we need. So at the minute we've got a controversial system whereby, you know, it doesn't, you know, I've mentioned the whole thing. I'm not picking on Hull, but they've got rid of players, put the queue in the rack this year, not competitive, don't feel any threat, which should be there, that keeps something vibrant.
Precisely.
And then you've got, you know, Castleford have come in and fought like hell to get from that situation, and are mirroring us. Drew with us at our place, new owner, doing, you know, competing. London, David Hughes has put millions into the game for a long period of time, despite, and you know, I say this because, you know, if I'm in his shoes and I'm being promoted, I'd have probably spat me dummy and walked out of the game and said, well, what is this? I'm not going to come in there and invest or
just be
do
whipping
anything,
boys,
and know that even if I do anything, I'm gone. So he's still there. Saw him on the TV supporting his team over at Salford, travelling, and they're fighting. And the scoreline, you know, in that game flatters Salford without being rude, because for 65, 70 minutes, that's a 6-point game. So they're fighting, which is what you do in the sport. We're probably, in terms of the ING scoring, we're safe from relegation with what I know. But despite that, we brought Aaron Penny in. You know, so that's.
Are you going to be a Grade A club, you think, at the end of this year?
Well, when we submitted our accounts with all the financial movements I'd made, and this is what's wrong, because my movements on a spreadsheet in terms of what I wrote off as loans, what I converted to sponsorship, etc., to meet the best way of scoring on the figures.
It's capable of being manipulated.
It made my scoring, which I'd left at 1.3, go up to 3.7 in the financial ranks, which put us at 15.05. We lose 0.25 for the Challenge Cup. Depending where we finish, that might drop. So we'll certainly be in the late 14s if we're not a 15. So we'll certainly be high enough that we're safe from not being part of Super League. But I just don't think that's how it should be. I also think there's going to be massive legal situations. If you're a club that gets positioned 13th by 0.1% from someone else, you're going to want a full audit of everybody else's.
Of course.
And when everything's 0.1, 0.2 here, 0.0 here, it just doesn't bode.
I'm afraid the RFL is playing with fire here, really. Asking for trouble, Derek, to be honest, in my view, and for precisely the reason you've just given. If I were, if my club were Club 13, I would, go crazy, really. Especially if I were only that far behind the club that was number 12.
Yeah.
And you'd probably hold up the entire system, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
It could take months to sort out that sort of issue. Somebody like David Hughes, who's of significant wealth anyway, could quite easily get an injunction against what's going on, and the whole thing could be, put on ice and on the blocks. Yeah,
there's some, without speaking too much out of turn, there's various owners with similar views in on a lot of things. This being one of them, and we are meeting to see what we're aligned on. And then we'll take that forward and see where that goes.
The thing that frustrates me about IMG, and I can only assume that this is because it's not part of their contract, but it's over 2 years ago now, I think, since IMG were introduced as the RFL's partner organisation. And I got the impression at the time that they would be doing an awful lot to help promote the game.
Yeah.
To really put the spotlight on the game in various places where perhaps it's not, it's been lacking.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't seem to have done any of that, do they? And as I say, that's presumably because it's not part of the deal. And yet, I'd love to see the contract to see what they are supposed to do.
The issue is, gaining exposure and marketing costs money, and they're not there to put money in. They're taking money out. So, my argument would be, you need to get bang for your buck. What are we getting that's bang for our buck in what's going on there?
I mean, as I understand it, they're getting 440 or 50 grand.
450, yeah.
Yeah. And for that, I think they've given a lot of guidance to clubs on their social media presence and on using, on digital technology.
Mm-hmm.
And your club, as with most others, your performance in that regard has improved a lot over the last.
But that isn't as a result of anything that anybody's doing externally. That's a result of what we're doing.
So that's been instigated by you, not by them.
Yeah. But,
and the thing is, in any case, I mean, I've been told they've done a good, they've been very helpful to clubs in terms of improving their digital marketing and so on. But you've got to take that on trust, because you don't know, as you say. Some people might look at what you're doing and think, well, that's down to IMG, and it's not, clearly. So what what are they doing?
The credit you would apportion to IMG on it is that there's a focus on it. So you look at it because you measured on it, so you perhaps put a bit more attention to it.
Yeah.
But really, what does it put in? What does it put in the till? I mean, there's
that's
things
exactly the point. That was a question I was going to ask. How do you monetize it?
Yeah, but what does it put in the till? What extra sponsors does it attract to our club, because we get however many hits or likes on social media?
Sure.
So it raises the profile of the game. But if you look, if the RFL or RL Commercial is writing a check every month for 37 grand. Or thereabouts to pro rata out for 450 over a year. What is that generating? What would that generate if it was towards a marketing budget or it had marketing staff?
Precisely.
I've publicly stated about the number of NEDs we have within the various organisations that make up the sport. I think if you collate both of those fees together, you could do a lot with that money.
750,000 altogether.
Yeah, well,
750,000 a year.
And
the NEDs. I mean, I don't be too critical of them, Derek, but as far as I'm aware, not one of them knows much about rugby league or has a rugby league background. And of course, you don't need to have a rugby league background necessarily to be an NED, either on the RFL or RL Commercial, but somebody needs to be there with that knowledge.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to be there who understands the history of the game, who understands what's worked and what doesn't, and how the game's developed in the past. I always get the feeling that with some of the NEDs who are there at the moment, if you mention if you said to them Neil Fox, they'd probably think it was a radio disc jockey rather than a great rugby league player. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean the thing is I think everything's about adding value, whether that's putting money in the till. So, if I'm bringing somebody in as a non-exec director at Leigh, then they're either bringing in sponsorship, they're bringing in contacts that can generate income and investment, or they could be bringing in investment, or they're bringing in a skill and attribute that we don't have that would cost us money to empower. So I don't really see that. I think sometimes it's good to bring people in from different backgrounds and different wealths of knowledge that can then implement good infrastructure in there. But again, I don't see it, and I don't see the change. So I think we need to invest our money in the Super League Plus platform. We need to invest our money in our officiating department and make that a more attractive area for people to want to be employed and involved in. And really the future financially, if you look at something that's your main income in the sport and you see it falling, and you don't try and diversify from that, you're going to end up in trouble. So, Super League Plus is the opportunity to absolutely grow loads of content in and around that, to be the go-to place where you get so much behind the scenes from. You get, the disciplinaries, we can put some of them live on there and you see what goes on in those things.
That would be great,
the match review panel. If we're the match review panel looking at that, let's have it live. Let's be transparent with it.
Is that going to happen, Derek, do you think?
Well, it just needs investment. It's one of the things I want to talk to the other owners about. I would invest in Super League Plus as a business, to give it the cash injection capital to do things like that. The John Wells touchscreen that's gone missing off Sky.
Exactly.
He did one, I think, via OKR. He wants to do one with us with Matt Moylan. But that kind of thing where we've got loads of stuff going to it, because then you can get your audience in PNG. You don't have to charge them the same as in England. You can develop it around codes. You can grow it massively outside of just what is in here. Monetize the games that are streamed on there with adverts and commercials before and inside, and when the goal kicks are, stuff like that. The way to monetize that, and then you get the level of subscribers. At the moment on Sky, if you get 280,000 watching a big game, you get, say, the Challenge Cup final live on BBC, or get 3 million. So if you make it where it's visible to more for a price that's more affordable, that's where you get your big numbers. It doesn't take a scientist to work out if you pay 90 quid a year for something that's got masses of content that you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
If you all of a sudden get 1 million subscribers, what have we got?
It's interesting, isn't it, that, over the last 5 or maybe just more years than that, the total income that rugby league generates has probably halved, to be honest, because it was 40 million a year under the last contract bar one that Nigel Wood negotiated actually from 2014. Then it went down to something like, was it 27 million, and now it's down to about 21 million or so. It is a declining profile, isn't it? And that's just disastrous for rugby league, really.
It is, and at the end of the day, I think Rodri needs more people there with him, helping him. In and around there, and we need to change. The game, when Sky said change or die, what have we actually changed? I look at what I've changed in my club, and I look at what's happened to my attendances. And it's successful. We've made it more than just about a game of rugby. A bit of an event.
It must have cost you a fortune, actually.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you speculate to accumulate, and then. At the moment, I am putting money into my club still, and I think that's the case for pretty much every club, and certainly in Super League. And that's not a healthy way for us to go forward. Our income now, I think central distribution, say 1.25, used to be 1.8. So it is getting less and less, and it's getting harder and harder to function. So we need to change something where we generate more money as a sport that doesn't need investors. Crowds are an obvious thing, commercial partnerships another, and I just think that platform, so when we only got the whatever it was reported 21.5, which was down from the previous 24.5, what it got us was a couple of years space, as I saw it. Betfred extending, everything extends to a certain line, which for me is a period of time that you have to work gallantly.
Yes,
to get to where that's not what you depend on beyond that. And if you look at what we got out of that deal rather than what we didn't get, so what we didn't get was a higher number or the same number, but what we did get was every game being filmed and produced, which costs money. It enabled us to have video refs. It meant we could stream them on our own platform. It meant we could monetize that aspect. So the job for us as owners and the sport and our own commercial is to monetize that to be worth more than the 3 million pounds that we got less, and then beyond. And that's commercially what we need to do.
But one of the things about running any sort of a business, and rugby league included, every business wants to grow its income. I don't know any business that doesn't want to do that. And you can do that, really, I suppose, in one of two ways. You can either generate more money from your existing customer base by charging more or making them, buy more of what you're selling, or you can expand your customer base and bring new people in. And obviously the latter is always far more preferable than the former. And that's our problem, isn't it, as a sport? We don't seem good anymore at bringing new people in, despite the fact you have brought new people in here at this club with, as you say, your crowds have increased quite dramatically. But as a whole, the game isn't doing that. And it's partly because, Derek, I think the problem with our sport is that it's never really been fashionable for most people. And fashion is such an important thing. When something becomes fashionable, people flock to it, whether that's a rock band or a football club or, you name it. The battle is to make people want to respond to something and, want to, and I've always, said that I always remember as a kid, as a fairly young guy, going to the Isle of Wight festival. And my dad, who'd fought in the war, said, bloody hell, who would want to go and sit in an open field with no bloody toilets of any sort of standard, no decent grub and so on. And he would never have done that because he'd fought in the war where he had to be in, he was in the open air most of the time. And comfort was his priority.
Yeah.
But you can sell that, if you can, and as he said, bloody hell, if you can persuade people to pay for that, you can persuade them to pay for anything.
Yeah.
Exactly, and it's interesting, really.
I think our problem is that when you say, you want to do both of those things that you say, and when you make decisions about trying to bring in new blood, so you say, right, well, what should we do? Is the problem how much we charge for people to get in? Well, it's always a problem for any business, but you've got to value it right. But if I look and people say to me, well, why don't you make it a tenner to get in and you'll get more people? Well, if you normally charge 30 and you make it a 10, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know how many more people you've got to find. And it doesn't happen. So, unfortunately, you end up trying to take more off those that you've already got, which is never healthy. The win on it, the solution to it is to have change, to have something different that reignites why people who are lapsed want to come back and why people who don't currently watch the game start to watch it. That's the thing that has to be changed. And, our calendar is the perfect opportunity to have done that where we've not, where we've got the issues. If you look at what's wrong, what people complain about, so officiating is one thing, loot fixtures is another thing, the Magic weekend and process. So if we reevaluated, changed the Challenge Cup, the format of how that's done, changed Magic to become like a nines competition, have it as an invitational where you even brought a union team in because there's a prize pot to play for, and just make things more rejuvenated and add a bit more spice to the games where there's something important to be in them for.
Would you, by the way, we've sort of talked already, it's interesting you've said the loop fixtures, which I think everybody does hate. Would you move it up to 14 teams next year, for example?
That's the ideal number, but with that comes problems because the biggest problem,
the distribution problem.
Well, that's not the one that I originally think of, but it is the one that would most get put on the table first and foremost. But that can be dealt with. But the big problem for me is, and again, don't want to be disrespectful, but The big problem with rugby league is that you get your blowouts. Even if you look at football, if Brighton, to pick a team, were down near the bottom and they're playing United, I go watching United, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion we're going to win.
No.
So you never really know. Football's in the balance a lot of the times. You don't see lots of big drubbings, and when you do, you kind of enjoy them. So in rugby, if London are playing OKR, it's whatever it was. If, back in the day, if Leigh was playing somebody, it would be what it was. So it has got closer and a little bit better, but there's no reason to be in the game for a long time. In other words, after 20 minutes, somebody could be 20-0 down, and you might as well switch it off because you know the result.
Sure.
Certainly in terms of a neutral. So my issue is with going to 14 teams is that gulf between the top and the bottom becomes bigger because of the number of players and quality of players to make 14 competitive teams. Really, I think the answer was 10 and 10. But then that's trying to find money for 20 full-time professional teams, which is too big of a step.
Not realistic, really.
So 14's closer. It gets rid of the loops. I think this will get tabled at the owners' meeting because it's a way of dealing with the London situation. It's a separate meeting that I don't want to disclose, but it's to discuss some various things and as key stakeholders and investors in the sport to then speak to the commercial governing bodies and see what we can all look at collectively. And it's not to go and criticise or beat anyone with a stick. It's to look positively forward at. And I think that'll be very, very helpful. And it might be that some pain in the 14 teams. I remember in this very room, we had the COVID year. I didn't feel that it was a fair competition to relegate from, nor did others. There was nothing between us, Salford, Huddersfield, Wakefield, and OKR at the time. And us five got put on a working group with the RFL over at Ken's place near his stadium at Fintel, and Ken was the interim chair at the time. And we all came up with a plan whereby we was in £1 million. So we said whoever finishes bottom, if that is Leigh, stays on the $1 million, or if it's not Leigh, gets swapped into the $1 million.
Yeah.
And the two teams coming up, the money that doesn't go out of the sport in a parachute payment, the money that doesn't go out for those two clubs in the championship, which at the time was the IA2, comes up with them. And you say to, let's just say, I think it was Featherstone and Toulouse most likely at the time, they both only get $1 million.
Yeah.
Now that would have cost each club 30 grand each
to
do that and get rid of loot fixtures. And have a better situation. Magic still worked, and that was what, as a working group, we proposed to the group. The problem was, in the meantime, Leigh carried on losing the games. Everybody else picked a winner to up. I think Salford pasted Castleford, in a game where a lot of people not playing, and everybody voted against their own proposal. So I literally stormed out of this room and said, I'll be back and make sure I take someone's place, which I've proven and done, and that was my motivator to do it. So I think this time round, a similar proposal, it might not even be the $1 million that we can get to, but there might be a willingness for everybody to take just a little bit more pain to get to a better place. So we have shown change. And we have got 14 teams. And I think the way we can get more players is we can relax the rules on players that we allow to come over here, especially the younger ones in the Q Cup who can add to these standards, which raises standards. People say that means our English players won't be as good. The harder it is to get in, the better you've got to be.
Yeah, of course.
And it will bring standards through. And I think then if we release some of those things and we can get more players into the competition, we can get to a better place with some short-term financial loss. We can get to a place to make more.
It's interesting what you say, though, about one-sided games in rugby league, Derek, because you're right. The real divergence between rugby league and football is precisely what you've said, that sometimes you can watch a rugby league game and, it's over after 20 minutes. But you can't always predict which games those are going to be. That's the point. And I'll take you back to one game last year and just read out the scoreline. Wakefield Trinity 42, Warrington Wolves 6. When Wakefield were at the bottom of the table. And Warrington, were not near the bottom of the table, and yet that was a one-sided score that nobody would have predicted. And in fact, it lost Darryl Powell his job, didn't it?
Yeah.
In fact, at the end of the day. So although you're right, I mean, this season obviously London are losing quite a lot of games, but I think they're showing signs of improvement.
They're fighting
as the season's gone on. So let's not be too dismissive. And
I mean, I enjoyed watching the London Salford game, and we've always had that mentality, British, of what's supporting the underdog.
We like the underdog, yeah.
As much as Salford are my second team, I've always had a soft spot there. I was actually willing London to win that game, and that's not because before anybody starts saying, just because he hates Hull, because I don't hate Hull.
Yeah.
But, just because I want to see London succeed, because they're trying and fighting, and they fought really well. And I should say as well, we need more Maludis in the game, because as a spectacle to watch, whether it's controversial or not.
Oh, of course.
it's
characters, Derek. Yeah, you're
Mm.
absolutely right. But we need a strong London side in Super League, in my view, at the end of the day, because if we're going to ever get the eyes of the southeast of England and London onto this sport, we need a club that represents them, in my view. And and I think they're playing a nice little stadium now, which is not too dissimilar to yours.
Yeah.
And it's a great venue for them, I think, in Wimbledon. And it's such a shame to see them, just here for 1 year and then inevitably down, back in the Championship. And you've got to say, you've mentioned David Hughes, but will David want to continue putting the money in that he has done over the years? Let's hope he does. But you can't take it for granted.
I think how he's treated this year. I think he's come in and not. He's not gone perhaps how he would have done had he known he would have had a fair crack at Super League, arguably. But he's certainly come in and they're having a fight. Mike Eccles is doing a good job there, and the players are. We've got a player on loan there in Jacob Jones who's fully bought in, so we get to see what's going on there. But I think if we can't afford as a sport to lose people like David Hughes.
Yeah.
So if we can find a way of dealing with this in a way that can keep somebody like him involved in the game. I think if you were finding a way of going to 14 teams and saying to David, listen, it's going to need a little bit of investment from yourself, because you're not going to get as much from the centre, but by doing so, and then whoever the two teams are that then come to make teams 13 and 14, similarly. And maybe there is a little bit of a commitment from us that are in Super League currently. And this is where I think, we need, when all this IMG talk, or back to the Elston days, where you can't have the clubs voting for things that they've got self-interest over.
Short-term self-interest as well.
Because if the Super League turn around to us and say, or RL Commercial or the RFL, whoever it is, and they say, listen, things haven't gone as well, so the funding now is not 1.3, it's 1.25.
Yeah.
Guess what we've all done? We've all dealt with it. So when we was in and got $1 million in 2020, it was 1.5. So it's now nearer 1.25. So without us voting and agreeing that we'll go to 1.25. So if RL Commercial or the RFL, they should be the ones that turn around and say, listen, this is IMG's vision is we are better as 14 teams, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And this is the model how we're doing it. We've agreed with these two clubs to come in on this funding. This is the funding model, and it means everybody gets 1.2 to position 11. Position 12 gets this, position 13 gets this, position 14 gets that. And that's for the next 3 years. Then that way, if we end up finishing 14th, that's our problem. We've gone from the 1.2 to the 700,000 or whatever it was. I think we can get somewhere where clubs will support that.
But you need a degree of certainty in the future, don't you?
Yeah.
That's the point. But going back to London being in Super League, one thing that strikes me, I spend quite a bit of time looking at the business models of different sports all over the world. I just find it interesting. I'm a bit of a nerd in that sense, Derek. But I'm always very interested in the AFL in Australia, or the Aussie Rules Organisation. On a number of fronts. That they've got 9 clubs in Melbourne that play at 2 venues, Melbourne Cricket Ground and I think
Marvel Stadium.
Marvel Stadium it's called now. 9 clubs. Many people elsewhere would say, well, that's too many, but what it does, it actually it floods the market, and no other sport can get a look in. I mean, Melbourne Storm have done fantastically well to have a presence, but you'll never read about them in the Melbourne Age newspaper or on their website. They're relegated to page goodness knows what deep in the paper. But the other thing that they did, which was a great thing to do many years ago now, was move a team into Sydney, which became the Sydney Swans. It was South Melbourne originally. And the point about that is that by doing that, they raised their broadcasting income by 40% for simply doing that, because of the population of Sydney, and the potential eyes on the TV product from having a Sydney team in the competition. It boosted their own income fantastically. And of course they then spread out to all the other major cities in Australia as well, and that process continued, not to quite the same extent, but quite significantly. And even now the NRL isn't played in every major city in Australia. It's not in Perth, it's not in Adelaide, is it? So us having a major team in London would add so much value, I think, to our TV contract, that it's an aim worth pursuing. Because with great respect to, if Leigh are in Super League, that's great for everybody in Leigh, and all of us who love the game, and but London, whether we like it or not, has a different dynamic to it, doesn't it?
And even if you look at growing, I mean, IMG in the initial inception of their involvement were big on that element of it. On the capital city being an important representation of anything that you're going to try and sell, certainly outside of the UK and within it. But I think, if you look at how the NRL, now they're extending to, I think, PNG's the latest one that's being talked about. But, if we look at like Cumbria, that's an upbred for rugby league here, I know you can't talk about merging teams together, but you can sometimes just put something there, a stadium in Carlisle or wherever it may be, up in that area, and say, right, this is going to have a franchise in such a time. Eventually, that's where the best players will go. That's where the fans will start supporting and create that change in that geographical location. Those are the kind of things I thought that IMG would be coming in and considering investment.
Yeah. Right.
Well, we've sort of been going for a while here, mate. Anything else we'd like to touch on, Martyn, before we...
Well, I think we've touched on quite a lot of things, actually, Jake, haven't we, Derek? It's been a long tour.
We'll have hit a few runners.
Well, it's been a real pleasure to speak with you, Derek, and, we've covered so much ground there, from your early days as a young kid to... how rugby league ought to be running in the future, and I've agreed with virtually everything you've said, by the way. So, which makes a bit of a change for me, with most people. But it's been great having you, mate, and thank you for welcoming us here to your HQ at AB Sundex.
No, you're welcome. I don't think any of us have all the right answers, but just openly talking about them and seeing what feedback you get on them, and people coming up with alternatives. Talking about the sport's healthy, I think.
No, absolutely. I guess just one last question from me. You're obviously a very successful man. What's the best bit of advice someone's ever given you? It can be a mentor, business related, the sport related. Can you think of that?
For me, it's all about just being focused and driven, and having a single-minded approach and a sort of can-do, will-do attitude. So that's not always easy, but if you have courage in your convictions and believe in what you're doing, then you'll get there in the end. So you don't see... nothing's ever a failure. You only ever fail at something when you stop trying to do it and you give in. So, if you don't achieve what you wanted to that day, then you keep going at it tomorrow. And it's just, that lesson is just part of the process. So if you learn from everything that doesn't quite work out, then it makes you better going forward, and eventually you'll get there. And then that success feels sweeter and more rewarding when you've got it over adversity and a number of setbacks. So everything in life is a lesson. But I suppose my biggest ultimate piece of advice I would give anyone is never dwell on what happened yesterday. Learn from it and concentrate on what you're going to do today, and don't worry too much about what's going to happen tomorrow or what you need to happen tomorrow. So be in control of the power now, the moment that you're in, and you can control, be the best version of yourself at that time, because that will dismiss what happened yesterday and make it valuable because you've learned from it and it's not holding you back, and it'll also empower you to be better tomorrow.
Great advice.
It certainly is. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll remind our viewers on YouTube, if you are watching this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're nearly at 1,000 subscribers now, Martyn.
Yeah,
so,
we are.
Ticking along there, and you'll also be able to listen to this on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And just like to thank Derek for your time, mate.
Cheers.
It's been a pleasure. Nice
Cheers,
to
mate.
meet you in person.
Yeah. Thanks, Derek. Thanks, Martyn.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll be hearing from you in the months to come.
Yeah.
So here we go.
Great.
All right.
Thank
No worries,
you.
guys. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.